I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Flora, can you call the roll, please?
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Ziss.
Here.
Thank you.
Today's presentation is an update from the Equity Advisory Council updates. Rob, do you have any introduction you'd like to make?
Thank you, Board President Gebhardt. Not that any of these presenters need an introduction, because they're all fantastic. Board members, just a reminder, at our board prioritization, it was one of the board's desires to have representatives from our equity councils come to you all, give you an update on some of the work that has happened and some of the work that's upcoming. And so we're excited to have Dr. Amy Nelson here, Dr. Nicole Villa, and Marilyn, who's going to be presenting, I believe, as well. And so I will turn the presentation over to Dr. De La Cruz.
Good evening, President Gebhardt, members of the board. Tonight, we are glad to be sharing updates with you and information about our BVSD Equity Advisory Councils, both the District Equity Advisory Council and the Youth Equity Advisory Council. We find that the voice of our youth and our equity councils should be and is informing all of our work in our strategic plan across the themes, across our initiatives. And I'm really pleased to reintroduce who Dr. Anderson introduced, and that's our Equity and Family Engagement team. Newly expanded team, we have Dr. Amy Nelson, the Director of Equity and Community Engagement, and also Dr. Nicole Villa, who's with us this evening, the Coordinator of Equity and Community Engagement. And really pleased to also have Marilyn Sue with us, who is a senior at Fairview High School. She brings a unique perspective as an active member of both the Youth Equity Council and the District Equity Council. Just a little bit of information about our equity councils. They were formed over the past couple years. The District Equity Council came together in September of 2020. During that fall, they studied our discipline, policies, and the role of school resource officers, and provided input. In the spring of 2021, the District Equity Council turned their attention to cultural responsiveness and appreciation with a focus on celebrations and curriculum. Throughout 21-22, that school year, the District Equity Council spent time community building and providing really important perspective on our work in Grad Plus. And that has been incorporated into our ongoing work. And then throughout this school year, the focus for this team is on ensuring a positive and inclusive culture across our district. The Youth Equity Council was formed in February 2021, and since then they've been engaged in so much, including the school safety advocate interviews. They've provided insight as panelists at our new educator orientation. They've provided input into our career and college readiness vision and educator effectiveness committees. They've been engaged with Growing Up Boulder and the Renee Crown Institute at CU Boulder. In August of 2022, so this last August, they were engaged in a leadership summit to really shape their youth leadership and their voice. And just in September, they've completed recruiting members for the 22-23 school year for our Youth Equity Council. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nelson, who's going to share additional information.
All right. Good evening, President Gebhardt, Dr. Anderson, members of the board. As Laura mentioned, last school year, the focus of the Equity Council was on Grad Plus. They gave us recommendations specifically around that initiative. And I know I speak for the entire Grad Plus leadership team when I say how appreciative we are to have community voice, to have the Equity Council giving us recommendations to really help us guide that work. On this slide, I've included recommendations that the Equity Council made and where we are at in implementing those for the current school year. One of the recommendations that was really important to the Equity Council was the need to have one-on-one conversations with students as it pertains to the 4 quadrants with Grad Plus. So we've revised the Grad Plus survey to include students identifying a trusted adult. Students will, across our high schools, will take that survey in the coming weeks. Our team is working hard, working quickly to develop a training and supporting documents for those one-on-one conversations so that teachers have the support that they need to be able to engage in those conversations. And we'll engage in those conversations towards the end of fall and into the spring semester, making sure that those conversations are taking place before students enroll in courses for the following school year. The council also felt that it was really important that the Grad Plus leadership team continue to engage additional stakeholders. And so we have 2 leaders from our Youth Equity Council, Jack Berenger and Sharia Badala, who are leading that work. So they're leading a team of middle school and high school students on the Youth Equity Council, and those 2 are working closely with our Grad Plus leadership team on a regular basis to continue to inform and shape that work. And then our Grad Plus coordinator will be working to recruit in the fall, later this fall, to form a Grad Plus committee that's made up of community members, families, and students to continue to engage our community in this work moving forward. The council thought it was really important also that we address deficit thinking. They felt they were really concerned about that, how that may play out in some of this work, and so they've asked that we develop a professional development. So we have a team that's working on that, and so that'll be ready in spring of 2023 so we can implement it for the upcoming school year. And lastly, they've asked that we put a plan of supports into place, that we don't just help students enroll in advanced placement courses, for example, without putting supports into place. And so the Grad Plus leadership team is working to develop a plan of supports that will be ready to be implemented at the start of the following school year. I got to turn the slide. I got it now. Okay, thank you. And for the Youth Equity Council, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn.
Thank you so much. Good evening, President Gephardt, Dr. Anderson, members of the board. My name is Marilyn Sue, and I'm a founding member of both the Equity and Youth Equity Councils. I'm first going to provide an update on the structure for the Youth Equity Council this year. The council is now led by 9 youth leaders, myself included, and we represent 5 of the larger high schools in the district. In August, we were able to participate in an all-day leadership summit, and some of you were able to join us that day for lunch and an activity. I know I speak for all of the leaders when I say we are very excited about the skills that we gained during that summit and that we'll continue to gain this year. We just finished recruitment and welcomed new members last Thursday. Students completed an online application in order to participate, and a committee reviewed those applications and selected new members. As you can see on the slide, the council has 53 students in addition to the youth leaders and represents 7 of our high schools and 9 of our middle schools. Having a diverse representation on the council is really important to us. So you can see the racial makeup of the council there on the slide. We do not have an exact number, having just welcomed a new council, but we are also diverse across a number of other identity markers, including gender, LGBTQIA+, etc. Based on the data collected during our focus groups last year, which we shared with the board in spring, we formed 6 youth-led teams. 1, school culture and climate, which will be done in partnership with the Equity Council. 2, Grad Plus and STEM for students who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, or BIPOC. 3, intersectional mental health. 4, multilingual supports and services. 5, professional development. And 6, representation in the curriculum. This year, we are focused on true youth-adult partnerships, so each team has been paired with a district leader and will meet with them at least once a month to collaborate on these issues. We are committed to translating student voice into real change, and this requires adult leaders to amplify our voice and engage with us consistently in a way that honors our experience. And now I will turn it back to Dr. Nelson.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right, so where are we now? So as Laura mentioned, the focus of the Equity Council this year is positive and inclusive culture, recognizing and understanding that if we don't have a positive and inclusive culture, our equity initiatives cannot thrive. So really focusing on how we become the people that we want to be. What we have next is we'll work on mapping out our action plan. We're in the process currently of recruiting additional members. Gearing up to hold our first meeting on October 12th. Anytime you have an equity council, it's really important to spend time community building, both with former members and new members, to create the space that we need to have these important conversations. So we'll start there, and then really taking a deep dive into what it means to have a positive and inclusive culture in BVSD, thinking of both the work that we're doing for our students to create a culture of belonging, but also our efforts to recruit and retain educators and employees of color. And then our Youth Equity Council, in this room actually, we had our first meeting last Thursday, completely different environment, music, pizza, lots of fun things, not so stressful. We had our first meeting last week, and it was absolutely amazing. Our youth leaders did an amazing job of creating a safe space where students felt affirmed, and the community that took place in the space was just beautiful to witness, and to witness our youth leading that work. So we'll continue to prepare our seniors, our YEC leaders, and continue to onboard our new members and create that community, continue to create that safe space that they need to be able to engage in this work. Our youth leaders are mapping out the action plan, so we'll continue to support them in creating that action plan for the year. And then our role is really to support them with forming those adult partnerships with district leaders. So that's a little bit different from last year. We made recommendations at the end of the semester, at the end of the school year, either to the board or to Dr. Anderson and his cabinet. But this year, in order to truly amplify their voices, they are engaging with district leaders regularly. So for example, the team that is focused on mental health is meeting with our student support team at least once a month. So student voice is showing up in the work throughout the year and not just making recommendations at the end of the year. So we'll continue to support them with that. And then they are also very excited to join you all for dinner so that you can meet them all on October 11th. All right, and we'll open it up for questions.
Dr. Anderson?
No, I'm not going to ask myself a question again. I'm sorry to clarify that, but I just wanted to thank Dr. Nelson, Dr. Villa, Marilyn, who is an incredible leader on both our Equity Council and Youth Equity Council, Dr. De La Cruz. I'm just so proud of the impact that these groups are having on our entire school district and our commitment to work together to drive that work deep, to make sure that we're doing right by each and every student that we serve. I'm just so proud of the work that they're doing. I know that you all have lots of questions, but I just wanted to publicly thank everyone that's here, everybody that has served on our equity councils, our youth equity councils. They've pushed us to make us better, and just so proud that they're a part of the decision-making and improvement processes here in Boulder Valley School District.
All right, Richard?
Thanks, Dr. Anderson and Dr. De La Cruz, Marilyn. A couple of questions I have here. When you talk about the next steps, does that mean that you'll be working on these areas that are being led by the 6 youth teams, like school and culture, all those bullet points you have there?
Those are our students teams, and they are authentically student-led this year, and so they are leading them, and so they're having conversations. The first conversation that they're having with that district leader is really like a listening session for both of them. Like, what work is already being done, here are the issues that we're passionate about, here's where we see gaps in the services that we need in our schools. And so yes, they are engaging in conversations. The youth leaders are engaging in conversations with their teams of middle school and high school students, and then we'll take that work back to district leaders and continue that ongoing feedback loop.
Thank you very much for that clarification, because I wasn't sure. The representation and curriculum, how is that going?
We just had our first meeting, so we haven't started yet. But it's something that the students are really, really passionate about. I think not just here in BVSD, but across the country, oftentimes when we talk about representation and curriculum, we're just talking about representation. So we think, oh, we read a book and there was a Black character in there and that's representation, but that's not what these students are asking for, and that's why it's so important to engage with youth, because what they're really wanting is positive representation. They want to see themselves in a positive light, both for themselves, but also for their peers. It's really important that their peers also see their cultures represented in a positive light, so they know the conversations that they want to engage in and what's important to them. They will be working with our language arts team, they're working with our social studies team, and they're working with our science team. And so we haven't started yet, but they're excited and ready for those conversations.
That sounds very, very great. The standards, that we're dealing with that issue right now as it relates to representation of the LGBTQ issues in our standards before third grade. And also, we're looking at issues that relate to the representation of BIPOC individuals and the history. And, we do have a state law on that, so I'm wondering if you all are considering any kind of presentation even to the State Board of Education, for example.
I mean, we haven't considered it. Maybe Maryland. Maryland serves on one of the state boards, but do you want to say anything? You don't have to. No, okay. Yeah, just in terms
And
of
not to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
just a suggestion, because
I think, so Maryland, something that's been really helpful for me, because equity is huge, right? And so nobody is an expert in equity, and that's why it's so important to engage with our youth and engage with our community, as we all have learning to do. We can all continue to grow and do better, and Maryland has really helped opened up my eyes and the eyes of other people on the team in terms of LGBTQ representation and how important it is. And I think that sometimes when we think we've done really good with something, like an example that Marilyn and I talk about often, and I know she's reached out to members of the board as well, is like gender neutral bathrooms in schools. And like we think, okay, like we've done it, and then we move on. But like Marilyn will talk about how, that there's one in the school, and when you have a school the size of Fairview and you're taking a math test, if you go to the bathroom, you're going to be out of class for 10 minutes versus another student who has one next door. And that's something that I wouldn't have thought about if I wouldn't have engaged with our youth. And so I think that it just like, she's done a really good job of advocating for not only for herself but other groups, but she's done a really good job of educating us as adults too on how we can continue to push ourselves to do better. But LGBTQ representation is a huge part of that, and she's really helped grow my learning and the learning of the other adults doing this work.
thank you again, and thank you very much, Marilyn. I know how much you're working at Fairview, and I had a pleasure of sitting in a couple of places with you, and it's just been, for me, a pleasure in terms of having Youth Equity Council, the Equity Council, the Adult Equity Council, and you're part of it. And also if you see our little plaques on our thing there, we do have our pronouns in there now, so thank you.
Stacy?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering how you go about recruiting new members, because it's been on a couple slides. You said something about an application and the committee looking it over, but it says you're still actively recruiting. So I'm wondering how you're recruiting new members. And I guess this is just the Youth Equity Council that you're recruiting new members?
So Youth Equity Council, we've completed recruiting new members, and so the communications team helped us with getting that information out, and so the application was sent to all actually 7th through 12th graders in the district, and then they had some time to complete the application, reach out to us with questions, and then we had a team of 4 that came up with a system and reviewed those applications, thinking about all of the things that our leaders asked us to think about in terms of the teams that they were interested in, or like where are students passionate about those teams so that they can support that work, and then also the importance of diversity. And so the Youth Equity Council is done. Equity Council, we're finishing up that process this week. So members from last year can continue to be on the council, and Dr. Villa sent out a form for them to complete to let us know if they wanted to continue on the council, which the majority of them do. But then we had other council members that moved on, and so we're in the process of recruiting for that. And it was the same thing. The communications team sent out that email in one of their communications on how parents can get involved in the district. And then we've also been trying to do some personal outreach, because sometimes people need an invitation to participate in things like this, especially from some of our underrepresented groups. And so we've also been doing personal invitations, but it was sent out through district communications.
Lisa?
Well, first, forgive me if I've done this before, but I just don't remember, Dr. Nelson and Dr. Villa, whether I had a chance to congratulate you publicly on those doctorates. We're incredibly lucky to have the two of you and everything you bring. Marilyn, could I ask you a few questions?
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So I've been lucky enough to know you for a little over 2 years. I met you through Equity Council. I wonder if you'd be willing to share a little bit about how these councils have helped to support you personally in your growth.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first joined the Equity Council, I was still using a different name and different pronouns, and coming out on the council and really doing this work has given me skills to advocate for myself, and really say to teachers and administration and people in schools, in power in schools, sorry, that this is what I need to feel safe and succeed, and can you help me in this? And so I really appreciate having these spaces to express myself and also learn a lot of these advocacy skills.
Thank you. Dr. Nelson talked a little bit about community building as being one of the core values in Equity Council and Youth Equity Council. Could you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, well, we spend a lot of time in discussion, and most of the time we're on topic, but sometimes we get to talk about what we want, and whenever we talk to each other, we really learn a lot, especially because when we are on topic, we're talking about our experiences and what we learn in our schools, and so, and how that affects us and how we enter the doors. And so we develop a very deep sense of each other and our experiences, and very quickly we become a very tight-knit community.
That's great. And maybe just one more. I'm curious if you wanted us all to learn something from Dr. Nelson and Dr. Villa about what it means to listen to students and to student voice. Like, what are some of those experiences, and how do you feel like they center and acknowledge you?
It's a big question. I think Dr. Nelson put it really perfectly that when we as a, meaning the district, look at an issue and do a lot of work to resolve it, it's not always complete. So I think really making sure that we are coming back to issues that we think we've settled, and ensuring that they're still working for our students, because education is changing a lot, and the environments our schools are changing, and classrooms are changing a lot. So I think always coming back and making sure that are the policies that we have in place really working for our students.
Thanks so much. I'm sorry if that question was a little broad, but your answers were all excellent, and I really appreciate the time.
Thanks.
Beth?
I want to echo my colleagues here and just say how incredibly impressed I am and excited by this work. Marilyn, we met at the conference back in November, December, and I just was instantly struck with so much hope and enthusiasm for the future with the work you guys are doing, and it's one of the things I'm most proud of here in BVSD. So thank you for the work you're doing, and I'm really, really excited about that. My colleagues asked a lot of the questions I took notes on as well. But I'll add one to the pile. You had mentioned professional development around deficit thinking. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and what that might look like?
Yeah, I think, I don't know what it'll look like yet. We haven't got to that yet, but just like thinking about it sort of broadly is like deficit thinking. So when we think about how we support our families or when we think about like the lens that we use when we're looking at certain communities, it's often a deficit lens. Like we want to help with food or we want to help with this or we want to empower, like we want to do all of these sorts of things. And without realizing it, right? Like our intentions are always good, but if that's the only way that we see our community, that's the way that we're looking at our students too when they enter the classroom is like they're not there yet, right? And sometimes it's really important to like think about the opportunity gap, but sometimes that also contributes to deficit thinking because we're thinking of it as like across the country, we're talking about Black students, Latino students always being behind, right? And so that's what's presented to teachers all the time throughout their education as they prepare to become teachers. We're having so many conversations about the opportunity gap, but coming back to what we were talking about, what the students needed in terms of positive representation, it's like these students are amazing, right? And you've met not just Marilyn, but other students on the council, and they have so much to bring and so much to give to our district. And if we only look at them through one lens, it's really hard to see what they are capable of. So it's really trying to address that and really like building up our communities and helping provide some different lenses for how we look at students and just being able to recognize that. I think that it's almost always unintentional, right? It's like I want to help these students, I want to close this gap, I want to do these things, and so it's not an intentional thing. It's often rooted in bias and microaggressions and other things that are hard to see, and so it's really helping like uncover that, so educators can really think about that when they're doing this important work in their classrooms and when they're engaging in conversations with students.
I don't have any questions either. Just like everyone else, thank you so much for the work you're doing. Marilyn, it's so good to see you again. I just met you once, but I was so impressed with you and so impressed with what you shared with me that I just see nothing but great things for you going forward and appreciate so much the work you're putting in for the rest of BVSD.
You have my vote whenever you run for an office.
I just had one question about the work that you were going to tackle around inclusive climate and culture. I feel like that's something we've talked about for a very long time with positive intent, but still lots of work to do. And I wondered if you had anything specific that you're hoping to implement and that can directly be felt palpably by our students and by our staff.
Yeah, so the first thing that we did is engage with our students, and so we worked with our students and created a video for all educators and administrators across the district to watch. We watched it as a leadership team in our district leadership team meeting and engaged in conversation around it. And so we asked students, what do we want? We want to create a culture of belonging. What do we need to do? And so they talked about things like representation in curriculum, and as they walk around the school, do they see themselves? But these were all like not seeds that we had planted, but these were things that students said that they needed in order to feel a sense of belonging in their schools. And then Dr. V and I have been really taking a deep dive into the research. We want to make sure that as we like talk about belonging, it's not just a buzzword. Like there's lots of research-based strategies that go along with that. And so we're doing a lot of work around what does it mean to cultivate a culture of belonging, and then thinking about that again, like not just like what do our students need, but also what do our families need when they enter our schools? How do we make sure that all families feel a sense of belonging when they enter our buildings? How do we do this work for our employees as well? And so it's really diving into research around belonging is what we're doing, and then continuing to involve the Equity Council. Like we'll continue to involve members of community and see where are we missing the gap. Like there is positive intent across our district to create those cultures, but I think sometimes, as like Marilyn spoke of, is like we try to do that work in isolation and we're not engaging the community members that we're trying to create change for. And so that's a huge part of the work, is engaging our students and engaging our community members and really helping us think about like what does it mean and what do they need in shifting our culture. And I think that one thing that is going to be really helpful this year is having the youth leaders. I think I do a pretty good job with building relationships with students. I do all right? Okay. But that's with students that I know, right? So if I go into a school and ask a student, like, what do we need to do to create a more positive culture? That's going to be very different than our youth leaders who have attended the same schools and who have similar identities. And so I think engaging our youth in the work is also something that I think will hopefully help us push the work forward this year differently than we have been able to in years past. Yep.
Well, I'll join my colleagues in saying thank you for all your hard work. I know that this is not easy work to do. Lots of assumptions get made that we have to challenge, and we have to keep moving forward. I just have a couple quick questions. One is to follow up on Beth. I really like the idea of trying to do professional development around the deficit thinking. So if I was to like give you a wand and an unlimited budget, would that be like something that you would envision for all of our teachers, all of our staff? I mean, what would the dreamed end product be for that? And I get that it would be more than just teachers, but I'm just kind of starting with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, I do think that it needs to happen across the district. I think as we were doing some of the work before, we were really focused on our high schools, but our equity council really opened up our eyes to like, this can't just happen in high school. Like these conversations have to happen much earlier. And so that's why I'm so excited to have Dr. Villa on the team, because really my background prior to this role is high school, middle school, secondary, and Dr. Villa brings early childhood experience to the team, which has been amazing and helping bring that lens to the work. And so we really are looking at how we can do this across our system and really tailor it to what that means at different levels. So I think it's going to look different for elementary, middle school, high school. And we know that we have to spend time engaging with teachers and administrators at those levels as well to really pull their voices into the work as well.
Yeah, I look forward to Dr. Villa's presentation someday down the road on how do we take this work to the elementary and to the pre-K, because as you say, these patterns and ways of conduct often start pretty young. And so that's pretty exciting to think about expanding the work to that. And then the other question I have is I was really excited to hear you talk about kind of the community, because when I think of opportunity gaps, there's a project called Price of Opportunity that looks at the whole community, because we need to do the work in the schools, but we also need to figure out how we expand that into the communities. And so the idea is that you're working with families and that you're working with others. So that's a place where I'm wondering how we could be good partners in trying to figure out how you take this good work a little bit broader, so that it's not just it's isolated in school, but the impact could be a lot broader than in school. So my question for you to ponder is, what can we as a board and a district be doing to be more supportive as you go forward, especially when you're thinking about the adult-student relationships and taking this work kind of into the next step? So I was really excited to hear you talk about that. Because I get we have to start like you are, right, at the school, but there's so much more that comes into the school and so much bigger impact that we could be having with this great work. So.
Yeah, I think that just in naming that, like just saying that, I think demonstrates that you acknowledge and value the importance of community voice and pulling them into the conversation. So I think that that's a huge part of what the board and our district can continue to do, is acknowledge the importance of community voice, and because I think in hearing that, it empowers our community and knows that we value them, so that they're more willing to engage in conversations. So thank you.
I think in today's environment where there's so much focus on individualized parent engagement, trying to keep it focused on a community and how is the community going to be impacted by this and how do we work as a community, not to the exclusion of parents, but as part of that, I think is a really interesting balance to try to find.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Richard?
Just one quick question, Dr. Nelson. How does the work of the Youth Equity Council intersect with the work of the Equity Council?
Yeah, so last year it probably didn't intersect as much as we would have liked, and that's partially because the Youth Equity Council had a very specific focus and the Equity Council had a very specific focus. This year, there'll be an intersection with a team. Are you leading that team? No? Okay. So we have a team that is focused on the same initiative that the Equity Council is focused on. And so and we have overlap with Maryland and other students that are serving on both the Youth Equity Council and Equity Council, so they're easily able to bring that feedback between the two councils. But it'll be a specific team that has decided that what they want to prioritize or what they want to work on is positive and inclusive culture, and that team of students, middle school through high school, will engage with the Equity Council on an ongoing basis, and then they're having a joint meeting session in December, I believe.
And just another quick one here. I know that the Equity Council has been doing a lot of work, and you've managed to get some recommendations on paper. And what are you doing with those recommendations, and where are they heading, and what's happening with them?
Yeah. And I think that you're talking about the recommendations that were made prior to Grad Plus. I think that it was hard because those were made in a year prior to a lot of transition within the district and how so just thinking about who was going to carry that work forward. And I think that year, the Equity Council made, I think, 9 recommendations. And so in order to carry that work forward, we really had to spend some time prioritizing. And so some of those things that were carried forward were like, we supported the work around the Ethnic Studies course, which is on track to be implemented spring of this year, so that the students that help develop that are able to take the course. And so we took some time to sort of prioritize those recommendations. And then some of the recommendations that we haven't had a chance to address yet intersect with this year's topic of positive and inclusive culture. So it'll be bringing them back to the council and like, how do we make this more systemic? I think before the recommendations weren't necessarily connected. They were kind of each on different topics, but things like the students like highlighted how, representation or posters in the posters in the hallways that are diverse. Those were recommendations that the Equity Council mentioned, and those are also things that students mentioned that they need for a positive and inclusive culture. So I think the recommendations that we weren't able to prioritize in that first year, we'll be able to fold into the work this year because I think it'll fit in well with the positive and inclusive culture work. So I think that'll be something that we address first after we do the community building with the council.
Thank you very much. I guess my next question is probably more for Rob, because I know that we have a number of councils. We have the Equity Council, the Youth Equity Council, we also have the Latino Parent Council, and they're all coming up with recommendations. And how are all those things intersecting, and when are we going to do things with all of this work that these wonderful groups are doing?
It's a great question, Richard. I would say first and foremost, I think in the statement you just made, I think there's we should take a lot of pride in that we're engaging our communities, that they're trying to help us get better, that we're listening, we're actively integrating them in meaningful ways. So as we think about so today it was about Equity Council, Youth Equity Council. I think that we continue to engage with our Latino Parent Advisory Council, and they continue to help shape and guide some of the work that we're doing. As a reminder, last year we spent a lot of time giving them some structure, and with some bylaws and leadership and things of that nature, so they're able to kind of better engage. But I would say that there isn't a big decision that we make where all those groups are not engaged, right? So when we think about even with our UIP process, right? And so you'll be hearing about our draft UIP, I believe, not tonight, in our next meeting. And we had a DAC meeting where there's some concerns, right? Some concerns from Capitol leadership around, how are we acknowledging the role of racism in our school system, in our community, and then how do we tie that right, as an underlying cause to the root causes that we identified in a plan, right? And so as we were developing the plans are tricky because they're annual plans. And so having, racism as a root cause, I mean, as an underlying cause, certainly as a root cause that you would be able to take action on in a year, I just think it becomes complex. But we've engaged in that conversation, right? We're looking to make adjustments into our UIP to make sure all voices are heard and folks have been listened to. And so that's just one example. There isn't something big that is happening in this district, whether it's Grad Plus, whether it's our work around belonging, whether it's addressing the goals in our strategic plan metrics, whether it's our improvement planning, that we've engaged both equity councils, Parent of Color Council, Latino Parent Advisory Council. They have an equal seat at the table as we start to think and wrestle through those things. So we don't have a summit where all of these ideas are going to roll up into one thing. But again, I mean, I think that's what we've kind of always done. We're trying to really embed them in the work real time, kind of like Amy had talked about our Youth Equity Council being embedded in the work all the time, right? We're going to meet all the time, right? We're not going to, plan for a year and then give you some stuff and then walk away and come back to you in a year from now. It's this constant intentional engagement that I think is the right rhythm and the way to really culturally embed the changes we're talking about into our organization. And we're committed to it. And I know that our team is committed to it. And I know that this board is committed to it. And so hopefully that answers your question.
It does, and I just need to be reminded that we have a big responsibility as a school board as it relates to curriculum. And I know that the groups that were mentioned here tonight also have a stake in the curriculum that we offer to our students. And I want to be respectful of that, and I also want to make sure that we don't forget the work that people are doing. I mean, they're working hard. And for folks to develop a set of recommendations and they just sit someplace, that is painful for me, okay, to hear. So I hope that as we're moving into the future, we're going to be doing things, adopting or whatever we need to do here as a board to incorporate some of the work that you all are doing, because I think it's critically important, especially with some of those issues that you mentioned here. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't congratulate both of you, Dr. Nicole Villa and Dr. Amy Nelson, for your wonderful work and for your PhDs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just want to say, too, I'm going to just turn back to Marilyn again, because it's just so amazing to have her here today. But Marilyn really hit on what's been really important is that she and the council have felt incredibly supported by the board and district leadership. After board meetings, some of our students are now watching board meetings because they'll send me an email and be like, hey, did you see they want to talk to us about Grad Plus? So those things are actually happening. And so they know that they are supported. And I just remember, I pitched the idea of a youth equity council to Dr. Anderson my first year in this position as part of my dissertation, and where I really wanted to take equity work. And we wouldn't be here without the support. And Marilyn is who she is now, but this wasn't the Marilyn that I was introduced to 3 years ago. A lot more, she was on the edge of finding her voice, but really shy and timid, like some of the other leaders. But to watch her grow over the last 3 years, they told me that I couldn't cry at our first meeting the other day when they led it, and I didn't. I did good. But just watching them really step into their truth. Nicole and I reflect and talk a lot, and that's part of why this work is so powerful for us. Is from our own experiences, we did not have a voice at their age. We did not speak about these issues. We bottled it all in, and we didn't find our voices until much later. During our doctorate journeys is when we really started to find our voices, and watching these students find their voices so early is just something that's really, really powerful, but we wouldn't be able to help them do that without the support of the board and the district leadership team. So I just want to express gratitude on behalf of the council. So thank you.
Nicole?
I just have one quick question, more for Rob. Did the topic of number and locations of our gender neutral bathrooms come up in the bond discussion for critical needs, and is that something we might be addressing sooner rather than later? I know Rob Price is not here.
I'm going to need Rob Price to answer that question as we did our facility assessment, whether that was captured or not.
Yeah, I have one more question that it just occurred to me now. On either the Youth Equity or the Adult Equity Committee, are religious minorities represented?
Yes, they are. I think it was really important when we had the conversation during our first year, the second half of this school year, we were focused on celebrations, a lot of those being religious celebrations. And so, yes, there are representations from various religions, and then we're still recruiting for this year, so I don't know exactly what that makeup looks like, but yes, it's diverse across cultures and religions.
It would be good to see that in with the demographics, just to get a sense of, that representation.
Yeah, we can do that. We wouldn't do that for the Youth Equity Council, but we could do that for the Equity Council and just give them the option. We always, people can prefer not to say, but it's something that we can ask and collect those demographics as well. Thank you for that suggestion.
Any other questions, board members? Any closing comments or anything you'd wish to say?
I just want to, again, Dr. Nelson mentioned this, but on behalf of the council, we are extremely grateful for all of your support in our work, and it really feels that you are honoring our experiences, so thank you so much.
You are why we are here, so let's keep the partnership going, and we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy life, I'm sure. It sounds like super busy, to come and talk with us.
All right, thank you. We'll see you all for dinner on October 11th.
So we are in recess for 6 minutes.